Hello, I'm Vanya Mackay, a Vice President with Kingsley Gate Partners, and welcome to Her Corner Office series, where we bring to light the stories and opportunities, challenges, and achievements that have catapulted leading women executives to success. And hello and welcome to our guest today, Inna Kuznetsova, who's based
Hi,
on the
Vanya.
East
Thank
Coast
you
of
for
the US.
inviting me.
Thank you very much for attending. Today, Inna is the CEO of ToolsGroup, a PE-backed growth company focused on helping retailers, manufacturers, and distributors deliver inventory performance. I met Inna several years ago when she was the CEO of 1010 Data. From the outset of our interactions, it was clear to me that Inna was dynamic, pragmatic, and a driver. Now, to give our audience an overview of her background, Inna currently serves as the CEO of ToolsGroup, a leading provider of AI-powered solutions enabling retailers, manufacturers, and distributors to outsmart supply chain uncertainty and deliver inventory performance from source to customer doorstep. In her previous role, she was the CEO of 1010 Data, the leading provider of cross-enterprise data analytics tools, empowering customers in retail, CPG, and fixed income industries to adjust their businesses to market evolutionary events and make better decisions through activating data. And before joining 1010 Data, Inna was the president and chief operating officer of Intra, the largest digital network and analytics provider for the open shipping industry, processing over a quarter of containers in global trade. Her previous roles include the chief commercial officer of Seva Logistics, and before that, the global VP marketing and sales, system software at IBM, where she spent over 19 years in a variety of global roles. Inna is the board member of Freightos. Her past board roles include Global Ports Investment, Avantida, and Sage. She completed her MS and PhD study in mathematics at the Moscow State University and MBA in Columbia Business School. Inna's accolades include being the first Russian-born global VP at IBM and named in the top 100 women in supply chain. Inna, now that we've given our audience a comprehensive overview of your professional journey, without further ado, let's dive into it.
Sounds great.
Super. Inna, tell us, what part has gender diversity played over the course of your career, from IBM to 1010 Data and ToolsGroup today?
So, choosing to build my career in what traditionally seen as male-dominated industries, software, technology, logistics, even more male-dominated than women, I've constantly been a minority or a token in a conference room. And I learned very early in my career not to assign too much value to my gender in a sense of putting myself on the other side of everyone else's, right? I've learned very early in my career not to compare my achievements to other women, but to compare them to the achievements of the most powerful guy in the room or whomever the person was. And I've learned very early not to look for any issues, someone not liking me, someone not agreeing with me, someone negotiating hard with me, to be related to my gender. I've learned that there are many reasons they may not like me. They may not like my accent. I may remind them of their mother-in-law or their less favorite aunt. Or they just don't like women. I don't care, right? I learned very, very fast not to keep that mental loop inside my head saying that I'm disadvantaged as a woman, and elevate myself from a victimhood to being an equal player. And I think that always helped me to build my career and to maintain my mental balance and honestly to torture myself less. Was there any situations when me being a woman played out? They were. I was interviewing for a CEO position many years ago, and the only other women in the robotics company were the reception and the secretary. So the board actually wanted to hear the references from some of my male colleagues and customers and employees. the way they said was gray-haired employees, to make sure that I really could manage the situation. I could walk away. I just provided references. And then, of course, every single reference of mine called me and said, you don't want to work with a company. If they ask for those things, you shouldn't care. Long story short, that situation did not work out. Did it leave any deep tracks? It did not. What I did learn, though, and this I think is the most important, is that if I do not want to be the token woman in the room forever, I need to support other women. So I've always put a lot of efforts into mentoring, into helping women who want to help themselves, whether it's by advice or recommendation or an introduction, and truly paying it forward. And I think that's the most healthy lesson we can all learn and build on it and build a society where our daughters and granddaughters would not even have to answer this question.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love the consistency there in terms of your thought process throughout your career so far. Can you talk us through your transition from VP marketing at IBM to your first CEO role with 1010 Data? And I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So I truly enjoyed my role of Vice President, System Software Sales and Marketing in IBM. What it really meant was circling the globe and explaining to the customers over 10 years ago that it's time for them to start building a cloud. I think rather unknown and innovative at that time. And I really, really loved that role. The only problem I had was I grew very fast in my career and I was paid less than some of my employees. And when I raised that issue to my manager and to HR, the response they gave me was that I was promoted so fast that they gave me all those last high increases, but because of my fast growth, I was still paid much less than other vice presidents. And that did not sit well with me because I thought if you promoted me so fast, I should be good and should be worth more than some of these people. But yet, after 20 years with the company, I was very loyal and I did not venture out to seek another role. I was just being upset, but that made me open to take a call from a recruiter, which I never did before. And the recruiter described a company that was business services, $9 billion company, 50,000 people, 1,500 people reporting to me in my future sales organization. And most of all, the company struggling with the solution selling, right? The see commoditization, the sales force need training, they need to implement best practices in managing global accounts and building solutions. And it all screamed me. This is what I've been doing for a large part of my life. So I took the interview. What the recruiter failed to mention was that the company was in logistics, which probably was for the best because when he told me the name Siva Logistics, I asked, what's logistics? Siva, I knew Siva was the name of an Italian mathematician, so at least I could make the connection. Logistics, I did not know. And it did not stop him or the CEO, who ended up with a short list of 6 people. 5 men was required 20 years of logistics background, and me coming from IBM. And he said, I have 50,000 people who know logistics. And I don't have a single one who knows how to create a CRM-based forecasting or implement global accounts management with local execution or do all the other great things that you're doing today in sales. So if you are game to learn, it may be great for you and great for the industry. And I'm always game to learn. I thought it was really, really interesting to see so many different industries, understand supply chain, almost from the back door, doing what I'm good at, sales management and brand building, and yet learning something completely new and different. And I spent a couple of days with his support in operations every month, whether doing inventory of a warehouse or going with a box through the center, one of the airports, or visiting our ports operations. And I've learned a lot about supply chain. And I think that getting out of my comfort zone was the best thing I've ever done because I really fell in love with supply chain. And I also understood how much technology can do to help supply chain today, and how those two industries existed on two different planes. My former colleagues would come to the conference and say, "Give us 500,000, we'll help you to optimize whatever you do." And logistics guys will say, "If we had 500,000, we'll buy more trucks." So you better come up and explain to us how exactly your technology will help us, rather than try to investigate it on our dime. And learning how innovation in logistics and shipping was different from innovation in technology, innovation in process, innovation in implementing lean, really helped me to understand a lot of things, and even apply some of those things later in technology industry when I returned. So that was a very interesting journey. I did help the company a lot. We got to the top quarter since its existence in 9 months in business development. I survived 3 CEOs and restructuring, and I started missing technology very much. So my next role was actually on the intersection of shipping and technology, and that was Intra. And I also wanted to get out of sales and marketing roles and get a P&L role. So when the CEO of Intra and me met, I told him right away, and I didn't come to interview. We just introduced by one of the very smart British recruiters who said, "Yeah, maybe you can help each other." And I told him I'm not interested in his sales role or marketing role. I would be interested in his role, but it's already taken. But I'm very happy to tell him why his product sounds wrong, why his pricing sounds wrong, why his website is so unclear. You cannot tell whom he's selling and who the customer is. And we had a very good and very honest conversation for a couple of hours, which resulted in him creating the role of the president and then CEO, practically putting all operational roles, sales, marketing, product, software development, services, data centers, partnerships under me. And as partners, we turned the company back to growth and achieved a great name recognition and brand appreciation in the industry. Created new areas of business, such as data-driven solutions and data analytics. And eventually the company was successfully sold. It was a great success from private equity standpoint, investor standpoint. It was a very good, prominent sale, a strategic sale. And I moved on to my next CEO, and then CEO role was 1010 Data. I was with 1010 Data for over 2 years, helping the company to get back to growth in strategic areas, repositioning it towards vertical value creation, and upgrading the management team, bringing in new talent, taking company internationally. We were only in the US before that, and we added customers in UK and in Mexico. And eventually, our current investors called me and described the opportunity with ToolsGroup. And my first reaction was, "Thank you, but I do have a job." But we kept talking, and ToolsGroup opportunity sounded so interesting because of what they do, right? ToolsGroup combines two of my passions, artificial intelligence and supply chain. And it uses artificial intelligence to predict, to forecast how many items of what type you need in what part of supply chain. It helps customers across the multiple industries to reduce their working capital. Right now, with the inflation, costs, and supply chain disruption, it becomes a very high priority. So, and I have investors who are very supportive, and we made a couple of acquisitions. We invest in new products. So we already grow the company well, and we hope to grow even faster going forward. So this is how I switched to my second CEO job 6 months ago.
Fantastic. It's really tremendous growth. And I guess from getting that first call from the recruiter after 19 years at IBM, how deliberate was that journey from that phone call to your first CEO role? And what were the biggest obstacles you faced?
So I think my first reaction was, "That's fantastic. I can get to the C-level suite." It was my first take on the C-level role, with all responsibility that comes with it. If I make an error in sales compensation, it's on me. But working for a CEO, being a member of the executive board, facing the problems like company financial restructuring, well, very much outside of sales domain, made me remember what really excited me during my MBA and showed me the business in a much more holistic view. So I started thinking about the possibility to become a CEO someday. So I think that's when I started thinking about it. But there's, there is a long journey between thinking and being ready, and others understanding that you're ready and trusting you with a job. So it took me probably about 10 years, roughly, a little bit less, right? From that moment in 2011 to my first CEO role in 2020 with 1010 Data. In terms of the obstacles, I think I've mentioned, right? Women are much less lucky in securing their first CEO positions when interviewing from outside. I know a couple of women who did it, but most of women CEOs I know were either the founders of the company or got promoted from within. And you can dwell on the unfairness of the society, but it would not get you very far. I just spent a day when I was interviewing after intro, when everybody thought I was ready to be the CEO, and in fact I had a couple of chairmen offering me CEO roles, people who knew me and saw me in action, but the roles required relocation that I was not prepared to make, and I decided to check my hypothesis, right? So back to my scientific education, I went to LinkedIn and I looked at the resumes of 100 women CEOs, and only 2 of them came to a new company, not through either family connection or promoted internally. One stepped in as a board member, and I think another one had the company working as a partner with her previous company before. So I kind of realized it was an uphill battle looking for the CEO role. So I decided to take another COO role, but in a company where I had good chances to step up very soon. And that's exactly what happened.
Fascinating. And having spent your formative years with IBM, a large publicly listed company, how have you found the transition to private PE-backed portfolio company environments?
So I think IBM was a great school for me. And as alumni, I'm forever grateful for everything I've learned and everything the company has done to train me, coach me, educate me, put me in different roles and different positions. I think the main difference comes not necessarily from public versus private, but IBM is an older company like Procter & Gamble or GE, who makes a lot of investment in training their talent. So when you work in IBM, you actually work with a lot of high-level talent, trained in best practices in whatever they do, whether it's sales or product management. And I'm sure it's not the same in some smaller or younger public companies who may even have high evaluation, but do not spend that much time taking their employees through sales schools and project management schools, and most important, training the first line managers and training executives on management practices. So when I came to a privately owned company, Civil Logistics was not small by any means. It was a $9 billion company. But I was surprised at how untrained many first line managers and second line managers were in some of the basics of how you interview people and how you motivate people and how you manage performance in a way that keeps people motivated rather than upset, and how you set practices to grow talent, and how you set practices to grow diversity, because many people want to do it, they just do not know what works and what methodology works. In other words, a public company with extensive employee development like IBM equips you with an amazing toolbox that you do not really appreciate until you go out on your own in the field, and suddenly you know that there are many things that you've done before, seen before, or at least know whom to ask and how to do things. And the caliber of talent that you deal with in companies with a long-term employees retention in many cases is very high. And that sets a very high bar when you start bringing talent in a smaller company. On the other hand, what I truly enjoy about private equity is the speed. Back on IBM, I focused for 19 years on two types of opportunities: high growth opportunities, such as Linux. I was the head of Linux for a while, or M&A, where speed matters, where we had meetings at 5 a.m. in the morning and 11 p.m. in the morning when the deal went through, or high growth areas in small and medium business. So IBM Life Science is one of the most successful startups. Another area I specialized in was the areas that have stumbled and need to be returned to growth, right? So Unix servers started losing share, and the vice president brought me in as the head of strategy and marketing to help understand what happens, right? And we found out in what countries and what markets we were losing share, found some misfit between the products and the market requirements, executed on the changes in the product line, the marketing campaign, and so on. So we turned the product back to growth in those markets successfully. So those were the types of opportunities that move very fast. And because of that, private equity environment was right into my alley, was right my area. I would not take it less. I was pleasantly surprised that if in IBM I had two windows of opportunity twice a year to add a new product to the CRM, because the CRM was massive and required some massive changes, very well coordinated across the company. In a smaller company, I could call the Salesforce group and get that product added tomorrow and the code added in 3 days. And that, of course, was a very, very pleasant surprise. Meeting the quarterly goals is one of the examples people usually give about the public companies. Working in sales, I'm used to the opposite, to actually bringing the private equity teams to the requirement of meeting their quarterly goals. Because unless you have some very special situation, this is the discipline that makes sense to maintain. It brings the quality of sales up. It requires much better execution in the field. And eventually, when the company gets public or gets bought by a public company, being able to meet every quarter on target, land the plane at the gates, not just plop on the field wherever we end up, is what really, really a good example. So for me, bringing some of those best practices into private equity environment was a good thing.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like you brought those best practices into the private equity environment, coupled with the agility and the speed that was offered, and the opportunity to make decisions quite quickly, and probably not have to be as coordinated and as complex in a larger organization. Inna, tell me, what emphasis and credit perhaps would you put on the importance of having a mentor? And did you have a mentor going up through of your career?
I think if there is one great thing you can get for your career is get a mentor. And if you want to get two great things, get two mentors, because nobody said it should be only one. Mentors teach us things that are adjusted to our particular weaknesses and our styles and our particular situations. Mentors and sponsors are different. People often mix the sponsors who can open a door, make an introduction for you, with a mentor who can teach you something. In reality, it's great when you can get both. When I was in IBM had a formal mentorship program, so I could choose a mentor. And first time I had to choose a mentor, I looked for a woman vice president because I thought that's fantastic. I want to be a vice president, and she's a woman, and she did it. And then I grew up in my career and reached the same level, so it was time for me to get another mentor, maybe higher level. And at that point, I realized none of the issues I was dealing with were gender related. We never discussed with my mentor anything about me being a woman. We discussed how to build distribution channels. We discussed whether I should get an IBM, an MBA. We discussed how should I approach a particular project. And even if I had a situation that involved a bad relationship, a man or a woman could have given me the same advice. I did have a situation when a colleague from another country behaved very rude at a big event that we hosted for business partners. I was hosting a table, and it was by name sitting because my table had the winners of a certain prize, and we set them there to get a short walk to the stage. But the colleague from another country thought he would sit all his partners at the table, so we ran out of chairs for the winners. And the situation was a bit awkward, so I told him, let's just wait, we'll try to get another sitting at the same table. I just tried to keep it calm. It's a joyful event. And he told me, what can you do? You're a woman. And I saw an American business partner sitting next to me, almost ready to get in a fight because it was so inappropriate in a corporate setting. So I almost had to joke it off. And I will be very honest, for a week afterwards, I was conflicted about whether I should call HR or not, because I was a vice president for a very short time. And I was thinking, well, then, today during Me Too and everything else, it sounds like a no-brainer. But I was afraid they would be blaming the victim and saying, okay, we promoted a woman to vice president. This is we get, a conflict at a corporate event. So eventually I decided that I talked to my mentor, who at that time was a man, and called the HR. And I was very glad I did, because apparently it was not the first violation by the same person. And they had certain coaching and discussions with him done to avoid other women getting in the same situation as me. But you can ask that question of your mentor, regardless of what the mentor's gender is. So when I was choosing my next mentor, I decided the gender was less important. What important was certain cultural aspect. I was European in a very American company, so I had troubles every time they discussed baseball games. And I thought, let me find the European who achieved high growth and without fully assimilating in all the external science, and get his advice on things, and that worked well. So what I've learned later was that you can have multiple mentors at the same time. Mentors can advise you on different things. If you're an executive with whom you're in a great relationship, like my former CEO in one of the companies left the company, and next day I sent him a note saying, I'm devastated, I'm not working for you anymore. I'm excited because now you can be my mentor. Because your mentor should be outside of your reporting line. Your mentor should be someone you can ask, how do I ask for a raise? Or how do I approach the situation? Or even, God forbid, should I interview for a different job, right? You cannot ask your boss any of it. So I think mentorship is very important. And I always try to do this for the women who work for me, regardless of their level. And I try to avoid mentorship in direct reporting lines. So I try to help them to get mentors in the company or outside of the company if I can, or provide an advice wherever I can, or just have a career discussion. It doesn't have to be a long-term relationship.
Thanks, Inna. That kind of moves into my next question. Like, given the fact that you're now in your fourth CXO and now second CEO role, what are you doing to promote and implement upward mobility, especially across diversity, that was perhaps missing, during the early stage of your career?
So twice in my life, I promoted people 2 levels up. Actually, I think it will be 3 times by now. Yeah, it was three times. I did not promote overnight, but I would give someone a position and then 6 months later move them up, right? And in 2 cases, it was a woman. In 1 case, it was African American. There were people who were performing well above their level in the company, but perhaps were overlooked for whatever reasons or perceptions or relationship. And when I interviewed candidates for the role, I thought, I have a perfect candidate right here. The candidate just need to learn the rope a little bit and be exposed to a role, so we can do it 2-step. But we do those 2-step in 1 year as opposed to 3 or 4 years. Every time out of 3, it worked. And the person ended up being the top performer. I try to set mentorship help whenever I can. I try to have diverse slates wherever I can. I always choose the best candidate for the job. I never give a job to someone because of who they are. I give it to the best candidates. But having a diverse slate, especially when you work with recruiters, so you can actually call the shots and say, can you please get me the candidates? At 1010 Data, we ended up having 5 women at C-level because of that, right? We're very lucky. We got a fantastic woman CTO. We got a woman CFO who ended up being promoted 2 levels in 1 year. And some people came from outside, some people came from from my network or from recruiters, some people were promoted from the company. It varies, as I said, depending on the area of business you are in and how you fill the roles, you may get different results, but it's always good to see if you can get that a little bit extra of help to those candidates who may be overlooked and want to help themselves and want to work hard and can use your help just a little bit to get that momentum.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure those a quick succession promotions certainly help them keep the momentum, and are also a great example, for other folks within the organization in terms of this is something that is realistic and it can be achieved. And I'm so thrilled to hear that all of those have been super successful after that.
Sometimes it's a double sword. When I promoted my first person in logistics, a woman to run a sector, my CEO called me to his office and said, I support you, I stand by you. But I want you to know that the presidents of both regions say they don't see her in this role. And I said, well, because they haven't seen women in those roles before. She's the first one. And she became a top performer. So sometimes the organization takes it differently. But sometimes you just have to do what you consider is right for the company first and the most, and for the candidate.
Yeah, terrific. I guess outside of putting together frameworks and policies, and also having mentors and sponsors, what advice would you give to women to develop their leadership skills?
So my main advice would be the same for men and women, but I think sometimes women can use it more. Gina Rametti, the former CEO of IBM, I never worked with the CEO. I left the company the day she started, but of course we were in the same company and I've met her before, always used to say that growth does not go with comfort. You have to get out of your comfort zone to grow. And I've met a lot of men and women in my life, but probably more women, who were upset by the first setback, who were upset by the first big disaster. And we'll meet disasters. Come on, we're all human. We'll all go into bad deals or bad hires or bad relationship situations. And the question becomes, can you use it to learn? And can you step up and make that next step? Can you collect yourself and find that next job after being fired? Can you collect yourself and make a good deal after you made a really bad deal, bleeding company money? Can you own up to it and say, I'll fix it, I'll go and renegotiate, but most of all, I will make it up by further deals? That requires a lot of stress. And what we do not realize is every time we go through a stressful situation, we learn a lot. In my last role in IBM, I had a product that was not behaving well in customer environments. And we had multiple customers complaining or leaving. I had to personally go to Japan to apologize to one of the top banks where the product was installed and overnight change the funds on all the mainframes. So the customer was very upset. I had to learn how to apologize in Japanese. Of course, and unfortunately, my boss at the time was in charge of that product development in her previous career. So I had very limited opportunity to get away from selling that product or to get it changed and corrected. At that time, I felt so miserable. And I just wanted to get through my necessary couple of years and get to the next potential role just to avoid being there. What I missed was that I've learned so much through this disaster that I would never learn selling a well-behaving product. I've learned how to correct things. I've learned how to work with R&D to agree to send people to correct things in customer environments. I've learned how to apologize to the customers, really apologize, not in a false corporate way, but listen out and understand what has happened and work with them to figure out a better solution. I learned how to motivate employees who were going through selling a bad product and knew the product would not be improved in the next couple of years, right? So give them assurance about what we will do if the situation comes up. Lots and lots of those things that you've learned only by being in that very miserable situation. So get out of your comfort zone. And getting out of your comfort zone does not mean going from this project to the project a little bit to the right, to the project a little bit to the left. It means get in the situation you really hate and solving it or figuring it out, or at least getting the best out of it, and then later understanding how much you learned in the situation.
Very helpful advice there, and being in leadership roles can be very stressful. How do you manage? I mean, how do you manage to unwind and balance personal life, passions, career?
I'm not that original in that sense. In the past, I had more interesting hobbies like ceramics, but I found out that my pots tend to overdrive when I got on another business trip and do not return fast enough. I usually just do the usual things. I do Pilates. I like skiing. I am very bad but very enthusiastic golfer, and yeah, and I like cooking. Cooking is a sure way to get a result after you spend a lot of time, right? You may spend a lot of time on making a deal, and the deal never happens. But you spend a couple of hours on the difficult recipe, and it comes out, and your family loves it, and it's extremely rewarding. So I recommend cooking as well as a way to cool
That's
down.
good to hear.
And of
Do
course,
you have
reading. I read a lot on the planes. I read a lot in the, whenever I have my own time, when I cannot sleep just before going to bed, it's really always very relaxing and takes your mind away.
any book recommendations for our audience?
Well, it depends on what you like to read. The latest one I read was a wonderful historical novel by Ken Follett, the Morning and the Evening. If you liked his Pillars of Earth, you would enjoy a long historical novel about England of 10th, 11th century. But I also like reading business books, and of course, then depending on what you do, I'm reading a very interesting book right now written by my friend Rada Palamaru on supply chain. It's called From Source to Sale. And it's a book of interviews of leaders in supply chain space, talking about what they've learned and what advice they can give. So there are lots of stuff depending on your taste.
Well, thank you for those recommendations. And Inna, in this series, we like to ask our guests to share a prediction for their industry. Is there one that you can share for us for 2023?
Oh, absolutely. Supply chain is a area where everyone wants to get a prediction these days, right? A few years ago, you would meet someone at the cocktail party and say, I work in supply chain, and they will say, very nice meeting you, I'll go and mingle. And today you just mention supply chain, and suddenly you have a circle around it, and they say, when will I finally get my couch? It's on order for 6 months, right? And why there is no baby food? So working for the company that tries to make supply chain the force for good is the best area to do the prediction, especially if your specialty is forecasting. And I think that what we'll see in 23 is that first of all, the disruptions to supply chain unfortunately will continue. Right now, we see the shipping prices going down and the volumes going down, and even some of the sailings being canceled. There is no line of ships to get unloaded in the West Coast port anymore. The nightmare we lived with for several years. So the shipping prices go down to pre-pandemic level. However, a single COVID case in China may result in a lockdown for a very important warehouse or manufacturing plant or a whole port. And the geopolitical situation with Taiwan and Ukraine continue to create havoc in sourcing across very many different industries, right? The semiconductors are not only key for computer industry, they're important for the new cars, for example, right? So we will continue to see the disruptions. And that would, of course, create the changes in supply chain. And here we come to the forecasting. to the prediction, every single supply chain will have to be redesigned over the next 2-3 years to go from being just a cost center to being the capturing of signals and acting outside in, bringing that fast disruption into turning it into fast changes to be able to get the goods on shelves and the plants run uninterrupted. So the supply chain will have to become predictive. That means, in most of the cases, ran by machine learning and artificial intelligence, because you have to capture changes daily. And you have to implement those changes across thousands and thousands of parts and products. And in some cases, the companies will deploy onshoring, though the skills and energy and the materials are not always available onshore. But whatever people do, diversifying suppliers, removing risks, will result in the constant need to re-optimization. And this is what we will see in the next few years. Hopefully, we will start seeing less disruption to consumers, even though the disruptions to sourcing and disruptions to shipping continue as a result of those redesigns.
Yeah, that's helpful and very volatile. I think we've all experienced it this year, and no doubt that'll be set to continue. So, Inna, thank you so much. That rounds up our episode for today. We appreciate you participating in this series. I'm sure our audience has found your input insightful and inspirational. I certainly know I have. And looking forward to staying in touch until next time.
Thank you, Vanya. I appreciate you inviting me.